Good morning, everybody. I'm pleased to see so many people coming in today and glad the weather worked with us for a change and you were able to get here from Sioux Falls and around Madison area. So thank you all for joining us this morning. We're here today because we have some very special guests with us. We have a group of people from the Special Competitive Studies project. I'm not going to upstage our speakers, but you're going to learn more about that project, what it is, how it started, what it's doing, and where it's going in the future. But one of the guests we have here today is Yili Bajraktari, and Yili is the president and CEO of the Special Competitive Studies project. And prior to launching that, he served as the executive director of the National Security Commission on Artificial Intelligence, and that's when we first met. Tremendous amount of work. He was also with the National Security Council. He's worked with Deputy Secretary of Defense. He's done a lot of work in Washington, and he has a tremendous depth of knowledge about technologies. But what I also admire about Yili, he has this amazing ability to bring disparate groups of people together, bring them together and have them cohere as a group so that together they can come up with something that truly adds up to more than the sum of the parts. And that's an amazing skill, Yili, and I saw it in you and you continue to do that, so thank you. Yili is joined today by PJ Maykish, who's senior advisor to the Special Competitive Studies project. He was also at the National Security Council, and he did research for the National Security Commission on AI. I'm not going through the long resumes of everybody because it would take too long, but if you want to know more, you can look them up, Wikipedia, and the Special Studies project. We're also joined today by Dr. Stephen Rosen, who's the Beton Michael Kaneb Professor of National Security and Military Affairs at Harvard. And here's someone who has a tremendous depth of knowledge about national security and military affairs. He's well published. He was also had a role with the National Security Council. So the in-depth expertise of the three people from SCSP who are going to be talking to you today is something that they wanted to share and I wanted to bring to South Dakota. Well, we have another special guest with us today, and I'm really pleased that she's here. We have our governor, Kristi Noem, with us today. And I want to say just a couple of things because the sort of general context for what we're talking about in terms of multiple technologies, but really this issue between what's happening between the United States and China and their respective allies is quite significant. And Governor Noem was the first in this country to ban TikTok from all state devices in last December. I have to say, Governor, we didn't have any accounts with TikTok at Dakota State University. It would go against brand, and we didn't do that. But you started a nationwide movement, sort of culminating yesterday in hearings, and I'm not sure that you always get the credit for that. I hear about other states banning it, and I'm thinking, didn't we ban it first? We did. But you've also done some other things. You signed a bill just this week restricting state and local governments from contracting with governments like China, Russia, and others who are hostile to the United States. You've also pushed the South Dakota Investment Council to fully divest from any Chinese-owned companies. And I know you're pushing now for Vanguard to create an index fund for states to invest their retirement system dollars. By the way, ours is totally solvent. Thank you very much for everybody who works in here. And then you've also brought a bill championing the prevention of China and other hostile foreign governments from purchasing agricultural land in South Dakota. And that didn't pass, but you're working on it, and I know that's important for us too. It's important to North Dakota. So there are lots of things going on that are going on around the world. It's changing rapidly, but they have an effect on us here in South Dakota. They have an effect on us here at Dakota State because we have to prepare young people for that kind of environment. So without further ado, I'm going to ask our first speaker to come up, and it's the Honorable Governor Kristi Noem.
Well, good morning. Thank you. Go ahead and have a seat. Well, it is fantastic to be with all of you this morning. Thank you so much for inviting me, Dr. Griffiths. This is wonderful. And I want to thank all of our special guests for making the trip. We are so sorry about the snow. There are parts of the state that don't have this much snow, but you are in a special part that is preserving our winter wonderland for you very well. People often ask me why this is something that I'm so passionate about, and maybe you are sitting there wondering why a governor cares so much about China. I'm a farmer and a rancher. My background was all in business, was certainly familiar with technology before I ever got involved in government and politics in an elected office. Served in Congress on the Armed Services Committee for many years, worked on NDAAs, and I served on Ways and Means, negotiated trade agreements, and did federal tax reform. Was very passionate on big policy issues while I was there. As governor, though, I'll never forget one of the very first meetings that I had after I won election, and I went to Pier to get a briefing on some of the transition information that I would need to hit the ground running as soon as I was sworn in. That very first day, someone walked into the office, sat down, and said, listen, the first thing you're going to have to do is upgrade all of our systems. We are operating on a 60-year-old server that is antiquated, and we are so extremely vulnerable to hacks that this entire thing is going to crash and people's personal information will be violated and it will be your fault and it should have been done 10 years ago. I said, well, how much will it cost to do that? And they said $70 to $100 million to do that for just the state system, which we're a smaller state. You wouldn't think it would be that difficult. It panicked me enough that I started to look into it and realized that just in 1 month in the state of South Dakota, our state systems had over 16 million hacking attempts into them from outside sources. The vast majority of them were coming from Russia and China. So for years, I've been an advocate of trying to find the revenue that we needed and the investment that we needed to make sure that we were, as a state, being diligent in protecting people's personal information and our financial information. If you think about the state and all of what we do and how we interact with the public, it is child protective services, court hearings, social services programs. You look at what the Department of Health has had to do the last several of years, even our Department of Transportation, how they interact with folks. Every agency is interacting with the public and has personal information that we are responsible for keeping safe. I would have never dreamed that I would spend so much time talking about cybersecurity and technology and computer programming and the real threats that we face around the world. I'd known for years that China was looking to destroy the United States, that they were building up their military, and the investments they were making. I learned when I was on the Armed Services Committee and spent a lot of time with leadership going to these countries and seeing what they really were doing, how they manipulated their currency against us. They're stealing our intellectual property. I was eyes wide open the last 5 to 7 years on what they're doing in cybersecurity warfare against us and what they're doing for advancing. I was talking earlier with one of our special speakers about, is it possible for us to even compete on a defense platform with these countries when they don't have the value system that we have? AI has truly been interesting to me as I've studied it to understand what the capacity is there, but also how it could be used for nefarious purposes in the future, and what happens when Americans have a value system that guides how it should be used and how it shouldn't be used, and we're playing a game of for keeps with countries that don't have a value system like that have no rules of the game. And that's why when we look at the priorities of South Dakota, it will always be to keep our people safe, to protect this country, and to invest in places like Dakota State University, which is truly the cutting edge future of what we do to keep America, America for many years to come. Dr. Griffiths has been a gift to the state of South Dakota. And when we have gone and looked at priorities of where we should be investing to get a return for our people, but also for this country, she's often one of the first people that we talk to. So you've seen the state step up and support dollars to not only protect our state systems, but also to invest here to train more students so they can go out there and make sure that they're engaged in this type of innovation, this innovation that is not only a national security issue, but it also is going to be a way that keeps us competitive on the economic platform that we need to win every single day. We need to stay the strongest power in the world in order for this country and the world to be a safer place. It's one of those things that was very, very clear negotiating trade agreements, that when you're doing business with other countries around the world, it's a friendlier place. Your neighborhood is friendlier when you're doing business and commerce with them, but you have to do it smart. And you have to protect your information so that you truly are doing due diligence to the people in the public that rely on you to protect their way of life. I think we give a fantastic foundation for that here in South Dakota. I think the rest of the country should be looking to what is happening right here at Dakota State University, the type of talent and gifts that we're turning out, and those individuals will be the ones that will make sure that we're still the United States of America, and not only that, but that we're still leading the world. So thank you, Dr. Griffiths, for inviting me to be here and to learn. Took my vitamins this morning, so I'm going to try to keep up with all the super smart people in the room. Not much sleep, but 3 a.m. came early, but we are excited to be here, and thank you all. Have a wonderful day. Looking forward to your presentations.
Hi, good morning, Governor Noem. Thank you so much for the kind hospitality and welcoming here. Dr. Griffiths, it's always good to see you, and I could not agree more with Governor Noem. You're a national treasure, not just for South Dakota, for the entire country. My name is Ili, and as Dr. Griffiths mentioned, I lead the Special Competitive Studies Project. I'll talk a little bit about SCSP later on, but before I do that, I really wanted to talk about how we met with Dr. Griffiths, because I think that story in itself captures where we were 4 years ago as a country in terms of understanding what AI is and how we can utilize this powerful technology for national security purposes. 4 years ago, our Congress understood there are two powerful things happening at the same time. Number one is there's a technology that is coming that is so powerful that it will have huge implications for our economy, our society, and ultimately our national security. And artificial intelligence, what we have seen since November at least, is only the beginning of these demonstrations of these capabilities and how much impact it's going to have for our country going forward. And so with that in mind, and what Governor Noem said, with what China was planning and doing and intending to do with this technology, I think that captured the attention of our Congress. And so they created, in the fashion of United States Congress, a commission. Not many people know what commissions are. I certainly didn't know what commissions are. But the most famous one is 9/11. And so I think our Congress usually creates these commissions for two purposes. Something has gone wrong, and we want to know why it has gone wrong and fix those things that cause those things to go wrong. And I think 9/11 is certainly a testament of that commission. And then the second piece is really something that it's coming, but we still don't have a full grasp of the importance of that. And yet, also, we're not organized for that competition. And so they created the National Security Commission on AI, where Dr. Griffiths was asked to serve as a commissioner, alongside some of the best and the brightest we have in our nation. And I was fortunate to lead the staff, that some of them are here with us today. We worked for about 2+ years in two things. Number one is understanding where is our federal government with the aspect of adopting AI for national security purposes. And I like to underscore that our commission was national security oriented. How can we help our national security agencies get ahead and utilize this powerful technology? And after 2 years, we published a major report, 759 pages, that with the help of your senator here, with the help of Dr. Griffiths, we were able to pass 55 pieces of legislation for the last 2 years, pushing our federal government to adopt this technology, stay ahead, and make the right investments for national security purposes. I mentioned because, as I said, we face, and Governor Noem highlighted this, a country that is organized differently, has put enormous resources, and has a clear intent to become a global AI leader by 2030. And this is not something that, I read it somewhere. This is coming from the leaders of the Chinese Communist Party. So why SCSP? When we got to the end of the special, to the work of AI Commission that Dr. Griffiths and I served together, we understood that this is beyond just a national security issue. That the AI and the impact of AI in our society, economy, is going to be so powerful that unless we address some of the fundamental things that we need to address, we will not win this competition. And that means how we build our foreign policy, how we create a new set of allies and partners around these technologies. China has deployed these technologies globally. They're building a global digital infrastructure. When you look at the 5G global map, is primarily red because the Chinese companies, heavily subsidized by the CCP, have been deploying their capabilities around the world. So how do we, with our allies and partners, create alternative solutions to these capabilities and to these technologies? How do we, with our European partners, with our Asian partners, create 5G models, quantum, and AI that we can offer to the rest of the world that is good for our economy, our companies, but also it's an alternative to Chinese-run technologies. And so that is one issue that we're trying to understand, and we find solution in building new set of alliances around the world to deploy these kind of technologies. The second question we try to answer is, how do we use these technologies for our intelligence purposes? These capabilities will have enormous impact for our intelligence community in how we collect, how we analyze, and how do we counter Chinese efforts globally. And as you have seen since November with the release of these models, the intelligence community really is at the middle of how they can utilize these capabilities. So we work hand in glove with them in how we can adopt these faster and how we can use them for intelligence purposes. The third question we try to answer is, how can our men and women in uniform utilize these capabilities for warfighting purposes? When you look at the rest of this decade, we face serious challenges by Beijing because they've been open about their goals and their aims regarding Taiwan. Xi Jinping has ordered his military to be ready by 2027 on issues regarding to Taiwan. So how can our military be ready with the help of these kind of technologies to counter any efforts by the Chinese military leaders in South China Sea and for that matter in the whole Indo-Pacific? And so we work with the Pentagon and we work with all the military leaders in accelerating adoption of these capabilities, so we're better prepared for the military operations. Our first line of effort is really focused on the economy piece of this. How do we build a resilient American economy to outmaneuver and out-innovate Chinese economy? And that means investing in people, that means building student capabilities that you guys are doing here at the Dakota State University. When we were working at the AI Commission, any given year in America, we produce about 70,000 graduate students with STEM background. There are 300,000 job opportunities any given day. So we still have a big gap in terms of how many students we produce and how much our job market can absorb. And this is going to accelerate going forward. The other thing that is going to accelerate going forward is the automation. A lot of these technologies will take away jobs. So how do we reskill, retrain our people that we stay ahead and we utilize these technologies for the benefit of our economy? And then the third piece of our economic working group is really focusing on how do we slow Chinese efforts globally by export controls, outbound investments, and everything we can do to call out their malign practices globally in how they've been deploying their companies and their technologies by heavily subsidizing them and calling them AI champions. Governor Noon mentioned Chinese organizing principle. They have a civil-military fusion in how they build their ecosystem and how they deploy these technologies globally. We have a line of effort that is focused on what Governor Noon was saying, how do we build and use these technologies in a responsible and ethical way? American citizens care about privacy. They care about their civil liberties, and we're not going to be China. We will never be China. But how we utilize these technologies and how we use them, we have to build them on the values and norms of our country. And that is something we look into very carefully and deeply every day. And then the last line of effort we have that is led by my colleague PJ here is, how do we stay ahead on other set of technologies? If we're talking about AI today, how do we stay ahead in terms of bio and quantum and all the other technologies that are going to be fundamentally so important to build the economy of the future? And so we look at the public-private investments. We got to find a way to utilize our private sector. We have built so many roadblocks in how our public and private community interact. If we're competing against a country that has a civil-mil fusion, we have to find a new way to dialogue between our private and public sector. So I'll stop here. I'll turn it over to my colleague PJ and Dr. Rosen here. Thank you so much for having us. It really is an honor to finally visit Dakota State University because Dr. Griffiths has talked so much about all the efforts, and it's fascinating to see it in person. Tremendous infrastructure, amazing students, and we look forward to continuing our collaboration with you, the governor, And again, thank you so much for your warm hospitality. Over to you, PJ.
Good morning. It's a pleasure and an honor to be here. Thank you so much for gathering with us today. At this point in the conversation, I want to talk about where are we in the competition with China, first of all, and then why does it matter for states in South Dakota? I'll share a little bit of what we suppose what losing looks like before I turn over to Dr. Rosen to talk about what winning may look like and how nations organize to win such competition. So first of all, where are we in the competition with China right now? Just a quick summary. The two largest economies in the world are the United States and China. There are many ways to measure it. If you're an economist in the room, you know this. But just in terms of GDP, America's 23 trillion, China 18 trillion, but a completely different debt to GDP ratio right now. The United States is at 128% debt to GDP ratio. The IMF estimates that China is at 77%, almost 50 basis points in a better position economically than the United States. China has been organizing for competition with the United States for years. As Governor Noem indicated, they've been working on the United States in cyber for many years, for those who are familiar with the classified record, but the largest cyber attack in US history in 2004 was called Titan Rain, and that was conducted by China on the United States ever before the OPM hack that China conducted in 2015, which is considered the largest cyber attack in US history. Took all of the personal information about our national security professionals and absorbed it back into China. So very organized. China has something they call mega projects. You might think of them as Apollo-like projects, so translated into it's a mega project. But what it means is it's a whole of society effort. All hands on deck, no questions asked, because there are laws for all of the private sector to comply, as Illy noted, in their model called Civil Fusion. So companies don't have choices. It's all hands on deck, and they select national champions to lead this. So these are quasi-state-owned enterprises like Huawei, who has no domestic competition, but they could take their capabilities expeditionary around the country and participate in mega projects, classified and unclassified. So they're highly organized with these mega projects. They have names and numbers. When you hear a Chinese mega project that has a number like 995, which was published in Christian Brose's book, The Kill Chain, it means it began in May of 1999. And so this is a project that Christian Brose writes about, which is to defeat the US military by developing asymmetric capabilities specifically designed to defeat the United States. Project 995. It's a mega project. All hands on deck. And it's been running since 1999. The other places we are in the competition is that however we look at Chinese innovation and how we look at American innovation, their system is working. Illy noted their dominance in 5G. The United States does not have an exportable 5G system, but even Mexico has committed to purchase Huawei 5G. The significance of that is it's defining the future of the internet. And that's being defined by China even up to the borders of the United States. They are dominating the drone market. So this is a place where the United States has exquisite military capabilities. But in terms of our commercial market, there is a PRC firm called DJI that has 10,000 employees. The lead engineer was trained in the United States. It's actually a fascinating story. Went back to help lead this company. The nearest US competitor has 500 employees. And we have, from talking to that firm, there's direct communications that happen CEO to CEO that are, let's say, unfriendly from the China side to the US CEO, talking about the competition and what they're going to do to dominate them, not just compete with them. That's the nature of what's happening in business, at the business level competition, but they've dominated the drone market. Finally, there's other places like energy storage. China has dominated the supply chain of lithium. They have 7% of all global mines of lithium. They have 141 out of 200 manufacturing facilities for lithium. And that is, as you know, the future right now, until we're in a post-lithium world, of energy storage is on lithium. And they're dominating those. So we've declared that those are places that they've dominated. And so this is just a little sample clinically, not to exaggerate, just where are we in the competition? The two largest economies in the world are clashing. There is one that is top-down, highly organized in terms of mega projects, all hands on deck. And the Special Competitive Studies Project is trying to do something different, the American way, by convening the private sector to do this together. And so that's our purpose. We think why this matters for anyone that the power of the nation is maintained here at the state level. You have the U.S. innovation ecosystem in your hands. You're training the next generation that can actually lead American advantage and American power. And so this is where it takes place, which is why this engagement is so important for us and why we wanted to come out. And you can think about we published something called the Mid-Decade Challenges to American Competitiveness. And we said there's 3 futures that are passing through your hands now. It's on our watch, which is the future of geopolitics. If you watched this week Xi Jinping connect with Putin, who's conducting land war in Europe against a free and sovereign nation in Ukraine. And as Xi Jinping said goodbye to Putin, a reporter picked up him saying to him, the world order has not changed in 100 years. Let's do that. Good luck. So the future of geopolitics is passing through our hands in this generation. The second future we think is on the line is literally democracy itself, the functioning of democracy, and the rise of autocracy. We don't think autocrats are declining in the world. We think China's rising. We think we see autocratic expression through Russia. We see it in Iran. We see China aligning with Iran. We see China making deals between Saudi Arabia and Iran. And so we think autocracy is a challenge to democracy. And we also think democracy must be secured. That's a future that's passing through our hands. And third, we think the future of strategic technologies are passing through our hands right now as well. What this is a chart of is technologies that are called general purpose technologies. They're ones that pervade most functions of society. So on the left, mechanization, starting with the steam engine, 1780. And you see that it remains with us to this day. So when a general purpose technology comes into the world, it sticks. And it begins to shape economy from there. By 1880, when electricity goes from DC to AC current, we start having electrical grids in the United States in 1890. And those two combinations of mechanization and electrification lead to the Industrial Revolution. And of course, it stays with us to this day. The third really leap in a general purpose technology we think was automation. So if you see US factories creating cars with autonomous arms, and now of course, if you jump in a modern John Deere tractor today, you'll see the modern world. You'll see literally the digitized agriculture in a modern John Deere tractor. So automation begins in approximately 1970, but it is with us deeply. China just demonstrated a drone swarm that is capable of autonomously navigating a forest. It's a high technological achievement. And so we think that autonomy is here to stay. And now, after digitization, United States, approximately 1991, first website in the world, 1991. Now the digital domain, for which you are training a whole generation to do offense and defense in, approximately 1991. And the digital domain is not going away. So those are 4 general purpose technologies that in some sense shape the destiny of nations. Now we think we're on the verge of 2 more. So for everybody, if anybody's played with ChatGPT yet, out of curiosity, and students doing their essays on ChatGPT and things like that, it's happening at a high school level as well. Large language models, which we had talked about in the AI Commission, are coming so quickly that it's in some sense limited only by human creativity how we use AI now and human-machine teaming. We think AI will be that next general purpose technology. And then finally, biotechnology. We've done everything from synthesize human body parts to create solutions that may help quadriplegics walk one day through brain-computer interfaces. So that's the next one that we expect to pervade society. So why does it matter? That there's winners and losers in competitions. And as you can see from this chart, just stepping back to mechanization, the United States has had a healthy role in determining where these technologies go and how they shape the world in a positive way. But now we think that future is contested. So again, the future of geostrategic, future of democracy and autocracy, and the future of strategic technologies are passing through our hands in this generation, and we're not organized completely to do this. So that's why the SCSP exists. We're a 3-year project that's established to just convene the private sector to do tech strategy together because we think it subtends American power, and we want to make sure that's not left to chance. So I would like to introduce Dr. Rosen because we supposed that we could lose this competition. So in our mid-decade challenge report, we said China could become the world's leading economy. It's possible that their tech sphere of influence could grow and outlarge the United States. We suppose that's true. We suppose that they could continue to develop military capabilities that could lead to loss on a battlefield of the U.S. military in the future. We suppose America could lose. We suppose that's possible. And we go through the mid-decade challenge and we show this future just clinically, without hyperbole, without exaggeration. We could lose, and this is what this would look like. And so we've partnered with other Americans like Dr. Rosen, and we're going around universities one per month to talk about the tech-economic competition, which we'll be doing here at Dakota State University on Friday and Saturday. We do a 5-hour workshop for undergrads and grad students. And Dr. Rosen is an expert in how we win, is how I like to think of it. He comes to us and travels with us from Harvard, 32 years teaching there. But he was connected to a strategist named Andy Marshall in the United States, who, during the Cold War, helped us organize the United States to compete with China. He worked for Andy Marshall, was raised by him, but they came up with a strategy method called long-term competitive strategy. And so Dr. Rosen will share with you thoughts about how we might organize and win for the competition. So, Dr. Rosen, over to you, sir.
Thank you, PJ, for that generous introduction. Governor, thank you. President, thank you. And thank you all for coming out. If I could begin on a personal note, I am a Harvard professor, that's true. I'm also a Reagan Republican. I may be the only Reagan Republican on the faculty of Harvard University in the Faculty of Arts and Sciences. So, out of personal note, I'm real happy to be here. I'm from New England, the weather, the snow, it doesn't bother me. You guys don't know what snow is like, okay? So what I want to do, though, is talk about why I'm here. As PJ said, I'm not a technology person. I don't know anything serious about AI or technology. But I am someone who is a veteran of the Reagan administration. And the Reagan administration did something that people say the American government can't do, which is put together an integrated strategy combining economic policy, diplomacy, military policy, and intelligence policy to thwart the Soviet Union, and we won. Okay? That's not to say that what the competition we're in now is exactly like the competition we were in the Cold War. It's not. For the reasons that PJ and the governor mentioned, we're in a competition that's much harder. The Soviet Union, governor, never penetrated us the way China has penetrated us and continues to penetrate us now. The economic power of China dwarfs that of what the Soviet Union had relative to us. But my argument will be, there are lessons to be learned from how a competition with an autocratic, hostile power was successfully concluded. There are some lessons to be learned about what you need to do and what winning means. I want to talk about that. And then finally, I think that leads me, at least logically, to why we're here, or I'm here, why you are here. Because, as PJ mentioned, winning means bringing to bear the strength of America, and the strength of America is in the private sector. I'm proud of our military, I'm proud of our intelligence community, but America is great because of our civic society, okay? So working with you, mobilizing you, using your talent, is crucial to the success of the endeavor, okay? What's the competition about? Governor, you're absolutely right. We use this word competition because people don't want to say conflict, right? That would be going too far, right? We still want to trade with China. But most of the time, competitions have rules, right? Economic competition, we obey the laws. We can be taken to court if we don't follow the rules. In sports, there are rules. This is a competition which doesn't seem to have rules that bind the other side. We are often bound ourselves. We don't do things, we just don't do that, but the Chinese often steal intellectual property, blackmail people, we just don't do that. So what is the competition like? What's the nature of the competition? It's a competition without rules for them, but what does that mean? It means you don't win by following the rules. You win by changing the behavior of the other guy, by making that other actor conclude it's not in his interest to do things that hurt me. It's not like I'm enforcing a rule on him. I'm saying, look at my power. Look at what I can do. You don't want to go to war with me tomorrow. You don't want to coerce my friends. You don't want to expand your sphere of influence. It's not in your interest. So what are you trying to do? You're trying to affect the way the other guy thinks about you. You have to get inside his head. You have to understand him. Okay? How many of you people, happy people from South Dakota in this room, play poker? Okay? When you play poker, do you play the cards or do you play the player? You play the player, right? You learn their tells, you learn their patterns of behavior, you learn when you can push them, when you shouldn't, right? You have to understand the adversary so that you can change what the adversary does, right? The Chinese have gone to school on us for decades. They know us inside and out. So some of you may have seen that video, it was on the internet, of Xi Jinping crowning himself emperor for life. Remember that? And the last premier of China, Hu Jintao, was sitting there, old man, kind of looking at a dossier of papers, and somebody comes, snatches that dossier of papers away from him. And he pulls back, and then he's hustled off the stage. And the guy sitting next to him, in a very human way, tries to help this old man. And the guy next to him grabs him by the jacket, yanks him down. Don't do that. That guy who yanked him down, his name is Wang Huning. He is the Communist Party of China's America expert. He lived in the United States for years. He wrote a book, America Against America. You can go on the internet, you can get it, okay? He's very smart. He's not ideological, he's not biased. He said, the strength of America, the market system works extremely well in America. They have a credit score system which people voluntarily participate in, which gives them data about their reliability. Maybe we can use that. And then he says in a chapter on the space shuttle program, he says, Americans love technology. They believe in technology. They think technology can solve their problems. And therefore, if you want to break the spirit of America, you have to beat them in technology. He's figured it out. He understands us very well. They know, the CCP knows how to talk to us in ways that make us feel guilty about ourselves, makes us pull back. We have to learn as much about them so that we can affect the way they look at us, so that we can change the way they calculate, so that they decide today is not the day I take action against Taiwan. Today is not the day I decide to coerce Japan. For over 100 years, American presidents of both parties have agreed to one geostrategic proposition. It is dangerous for America if an autocratic power controls the resources of Eurasia. Wilhelmine Germany in World War I looked like it might do that. Hitler clearly wanted to dominate the whole Eurasian landmass and then come after the United States, by the way. He was planning to use Norway as the jumping off point for the invasion of North America. He got stuck in the Soviet Union, so that never happened. And the Soviet Union, the authors of the American policy of containment, we must not allow the Soviet Union to control the economy of Eurasia, because if they do so, they will have the power to come after us. So what's happening now? China's economy is growing, going close to that of the United States, and it is partnering in an unbreakable friendship with Russia and reaching into the Middle East and trying to reach into East Europe, or Ukraine, right? Those of you who are students of geopolitics, Mackinder says Ukraine is the key to the heartland of Europe for food and other reasons, okay? So what is this all about? This is about taking action to ensure that China does not think it can or it is in its interest to take actions to expand its influence over Eurasia so that it can gain control of the resources that it can bring to bear against us. You may have all heard of the Belt and Road Project, One Belt, One Road. It's a plan by China to build the economic, technological infrastructure to integrate Eurasia into one trading zone, directed by China. I mean, as Peter said, this is not secret. They publish it. They're proud of it. This is Xi Jinping's master program. This is his signature program. I'm going to build railroads. I'm going to build pipelines. I'm going to build 5G internet. All of Eurasia is going to be linked. That's what this is about. Okay? How do we stop it? We understand the way the adversary looks at us. We study the adversary. This is the key to the competitive strategies method. You don't simply say, hey, this is like a gymnastics competition. I'm going to figure out my routine, and I'm going to execute my routine as best I can, and the judges will judge whether I'm better than other people. Well, this is a competition without judges, right? So we have to take action that affects them, so we have to understand how they look at us. That's the essence of the competitive strategies methods that we'll be discussing with people and exploring in more depth. I can't go into the whole method, but you read what they read. You look at what they say. You look at how they operate so that you can understand what makes them tick. Okay? Which leads me to the last and final part of my talk. What did Wang Huning find impressive about America? The private sector. Right? All of you are following the current war in Ukraine, which the Ukrainian people are fighting heroically and successfully in. But what is one of the key factors to Ukrainian success? Internet connectivity, right? Without internet connectivity, the major strategic weapon of Ukraine, which is Vladimir Zelensky, can't reach out to the rest of the world to mobilize public opinion to support Ukraine. People can't see the videos of Russian atrocities. People can't see, the Ukrainians can't run their drones. Internet connectivity is key. We know that Russia tried to take down the internet in Ukraine on day D-1 of the war, and they failed because of efforts by Ukrainians, the American government, and because of Starlink. Elon Musk, he says in public, preemptively deployed Starlink stations and solar panels and generators to keep them going in case those of the power sources were taken down. And that enabled the Ukrainians to maintain connectivity, which was a big part, I'm not going to say the only part, but a big part in this success. And you know who noticed this? The Chinese. Recently, they took Elon Musk and said, you're not going to do that to us. You're not going to give Starlink discs there all over China. You let's be clear about this. But what happened? It was the private sector, working with the American government, to be sure, but utilizing the genius, the talent, the resources of the private sector to create something which is deterring China now from taking action. Right now, the CCP have tried to say, hey, let's put this whole thing on hold until we figure out why the Russians failed in Ukraine, failing meaning not achieving rapid success. Let's figure out what we need to do so that doesn't happen to us. Which means we have to maintain our competitive advantage in what we're able to do to deter the Chinese while they're trying to take us down. We have to run fast to stay ahead, but we have to run fast in areas where the Chinese pay attention to in ways that make them decide that it's not in their interest to go to war. So PJ, what does winning mean? Winning means taking actions so that the Chinese decide on their own that today's not today, this is not the year for us to coerce American friends. Take action hostile to the interests of private American citizens doing business in the United States. And who are the crucial actors in winning? You. And people like you all over the country. Does that mean you will have to go to work for the American government? No, I don't want to work for the American government. Americans are not a particularly good employer under many circumstances. I would if I have to. I have. But the beauty of America is you can serve America while being out of government. People working in companies, people working in universities. The model, is the kind of thing, the way to which American society banded together to win World War II. So building the networks that link together the talent in this room with the people who are thinking about how to coordinate the other elements of our competition with China, and bringing to bear the talent, which is the key to success, in ways that get at the Chinese calculations, is why I'm here, why the Special Competitive Studies Project is in operation, and why we need, not want, why we need to work with you. And not you only, primarily, but your students and the young people working with you. It's their world. I'm an old guy. It's your children who are going to live in the world. It's out of the world that PJ described, in which we have lost our advantage, have lost our ability to promote democracy, have lost our autonomy. We're not. So we need to work with your children. We need to work with your students. That's why we're here. Thank you very much.
Yeah, sure. Thank you, first of all, everybody, for making time for this morning. And we'd love to do any kind of Q&A, have some dialogue if anybody has any questions about the nature of the competition or why we exist.
Yes, doctor?
My question is, how...
Could you stand up and just tell, we don't know you, so who you are? Everybody else knows who you are, but...
How frustrated are the Chinese with their partners, the Russians, at their inability to win this war quickly in Ukraine?
We don't know. We don't, at least in the sources I have available to me, we don't know what goes on in the private conversations between Xi Jinping and Putin. We do know that the Chinese have hedged on their engagement with Russia. If you follow this, Putin said, hey, Xi, how about this gas pipeline we've been talking about for a couple, 3 years now, so that I can sell Russian gas to China because I can't sell it to Europe anymore. And the output of the recent summit was Xi Jinping says, well, this will be a subject for continued review and study. So they're frustrated with the Russians because the Russians, let me put it this way, if I were Xi Jinping, I would be frustrated with Putin because Putin has mobilized the West against autocracies. The war in Ukraine, as many people have said, I'm not the only one to say, it was a wake-up call. Everybody said, hey, Putin will never invade. People don't do that anymore. That's so 19th century. You know, using an army to seize land. People, gee, we're so modern now. We don't do that. So don't worry about it. But now we say, hey, people do that, and we do have to worry about it. You have to spend money. So if I were Xi, I'd be ticked off a little bit with Putin that he woke up the sleeping democracies. On the other hand, Putin has given Xi this enormous opportunity. Why are we not as well prepared to deal with China now as we should be? Well, we were fighting the global war on terror for 20 years. You know what the Chinese call that? The decades of opportunity. America's busy fighting the Middle East. They're not paying attention to us. In fact, they come to us, Chinese people, to help them fight the war on terror. What is Putin doing? He is taking American resources, American attention span, leadership attention, and focusing it on Ukraine and Russia. Which nobody has infinite resources. We'd love to do everything. We can't. So we do more in Ukraine. It makes it harder for us to do the kinds of things we need to do in China. Now, we are working on that. But it's in Xi's interest to keep the war in Ukraine going, which means preventing Russian defeat, because that keeps the United States engaged. So yes, Xi is ticked off with Putin in some ways for waking us up. In some ways, he says, you're giving us, China, a tool to keep the Americans busy, or at least to take some part of the resources that they would otherwise use to build up their capabilities. And our job is to manage the dual competitions. We used to know how to do this, right? World War II, we fought Japan and Germany and did it, right? Cold War, we fought Communist China and the Soviet Union, and we did it. But we've forgotten some of those lessons. We have to learn how to manage a multi-theater competition. Not easy, but not impossible. So I don't want to take too much, but...
Can I just add one thing? So I'll bring this to the focus of our work, which is technology and national security. I think on some aspects, the war in Ukraine really demonstrates the role of technology. When you look at it, what happened before the invasion of Ukraine is that some of the tech companies went in and saved in their cloud platforms some of the most critical data of Ukrainian citizens. Because we knew, and I think everybody knew, that the Russians will go after the cyber attacks, steal everything that belongs to Ukrainian on the digital space. So with the help of US companies, Ukrainian government was able to get that data out, save it in the cloud, so they can preserve some kind of digital normalcy. So that's one piece. On the military front, we see every day what's happening with drones and everything, and the ability of Ukrainian military to utilize these technologies. To add on Steve's points about what China is learning and not learning from the conflict in Ukraine, I think number one is we don't know the extent of Putin's telling Xi Jinping what kind of operation he's going to do in Ukraine. Some say that he said, it's just going to be a small special military operation. It will be over soon. I think, later when we saw what's happening, I think Xi Jinping really is not happy with how that went, because it really distracted him from what he was planning to do in Asia. The second piece is that I think Xi Jinping is learning is our ability with our allies and partners to really put cost on these kind of aggressions through economic means, financial means, isolation, sanctions. So what he's going to take away from this is how to fast create, independence from the global market on the way we can actually put cost on him. And so he doesn't do anything, as Steve was saying, deciding that today is not the day for him to do anything stupid in Taiwan or in East Asia. But I'll stop there for any other questions.
Yes, my name is Joe Fiala. I'm with the Governor's Office of Economic Development here in South Dakota. I would be very curious to know, as you're doing your work across the country, what you view as success. If you could give us some examples, or at least me, I'm slow on the uptake, so I need some guidance.
Should I add it? Yeah. So sir, when we started this, I forgot to mention that the project we're doing is a replica of the model that Dr. Kissinger led in the 50s called Special Studies Project. And the goal of that project in the 50s was Soviet Union launched the Sputnik satellite that caught the United States by surprise. They were about to reach nuclear parity with the United States. So Dr. Kissinger and Nelson Rockefeller bring the best and the brightest we have in the 50s on both sides of the aisle to look at how we can create a framework of organizing to compete more effectively against Soviet Union. The first time when we chatted with Dr. Kissinger about this project, he said what we had during Cold War was that the intellectual capital of the United States was happening among college campuses. That's where people were learning about Soviet Union that Steve was talking about, learning about their thinking, their worldviews, learning the language, and learning how to better organize to compete against them. Something that Dr. Kissinger thought we don't have right now happening in college campuses. And so when we started this project was, how can we go around the country, Dakota State being the second test case we have, talk about the technology competition. Why does this matter? Why does it matter for our national security? Why this timeline that both PJ and Steve were talking about, and why this decade is really the decisive decade that we stay ahead. And so that's the purpose of this. What we try to do is we work closely with Dr. Griffiths of how do we educate young men here on college campuses to understand that this is happening beyond your campus. We have interns that are helping us in our day job, and they're around the country because you can do now these capabilities through online means. But also really just creating a new generation of Americans that understand that we're in competition, as Steve was saying. That every day, there's a country that is organized, that is resourced with a clear intent to get ahead of us. And so that's the purpose of what we're trying to do. As PJ said, and Steve, our energy is really in the private sector. So how do we bring private sector, academia, and government together to get ourselves organized, to make the right investments so we can stay ahead?
Yeah, thanks, Zili. I would add, in some sense, from the tech panel, what we think winning looks like is three things. There's unity, ambition, and results that come from pulling everyone together. I mean, this whole project was really Illy's idea after he led the AI Commission in cooperation with Eric Schmidt, who funded this project outright for 3 years. And the whole idea was we looked through AI and said China was out-organizing us. That was the simple diagnosis. So they ran on this general purpose technology in 2017. They had a national plan in 2017 that was real, not like a strategy on the shelf. It was funded, it was led, it was organized. They had national mission managers like we did under Apollo days. So they were moving. We're 5 years behind them. And so the thought was, this is just one technology that's going to drive the competition. And so we need to get together. So the unity, like pulling together industry, government, academia, is one piece. We've built a public-private model that's invited private sector thought leaders who do horizon scanning for a living of where tech's going, people who build things for a living, technologists, and investors, and put them together in one private model. And there is no one who has said they wouldn't give us 8 to 10 hours a year to do strategy together. And so we're pulling people together. Like the senior advisors for the tech panel are Condi Rice, Reid Hoffman, who built LinkedIn, and Ben Horowitz, leader of Andreessen Horowitz, a tier 1 venture firm. They're all in. We just said, hey, we want to pull the private sector together. They said we're in. And below those three is the same story. Everybody's in. So unity. And in terms of ambition, when America gets ambitious and it gets unified, it's dangerous. I mean, that's really what we're trying to do. So we're developing national action plans for U.S. advantage in specific technologies. And the first line of effort in every plan is an audacious technology objective that the nation should pursue together, public-private. And so we produced one on fusion energy breakout. We're about to produce one on biotechnology leadership. You should see the moonshots in there. There's 3 moonshots. I'll keep the suspense. But they were developed by, with, and through the private sector to say, what is the appropriately stretchy goal that America should do, like a moon, in biotech that everybody could get on board with, to include biodefense of the nation? So I think it's unity, it's ambition, and it's results. I mean, ultimately, I've known Illy since we were doing something in the Pentagon called the Third Offset. I was uniformed military. Illy was a civilian leader at the highest levels in government and came up the blue-collar way from a desk in the Pentagon. And one of the things that he's always thought about since I've known him is, how do we actually achieve this? How do we actually land these things in democracy? In essence, I think simply what he does 7 days a week is think, how do we get this done? And in the AI Commission, we had the authority as a congressional of Congress, for Congress, to actually draft legislation, so that if Senate or the House liked the recommendation, they could just cut and paste the text. And we hired professionals to write those legislations. That's an example of an idea he had about, like, how do we get it done? So I would just add, the third thing is, what does winning look like, is actual fielded results of American tech power. Because that's how we grade the competition. Some people use things like publications and other things. We produced a gap analysis, which I've not shown here today, but it's in our publications. And we use fielded technological results. That's what matters. That's what takes the form of power. Power is real. It's thingly. And so with unity, ambition, and results, we think that's what winning looks like.
I guess my question is, can you do it faster? I mean, because China, obviously, being a communist country, can dictate and force and be ugly. And while we've got this bright, shiny object of Ukraine, what have they been doing that we've been distracted from? And can we bring that partnership together to actually have action quick enough to compete?
So I agree with you 100%, Governor. One thing that we repeat to all our interlocutors, whether in government, Congress, is between now and 2025, there's only one budget cycle when you think about it. We all think 2027 is so far out, 26, in whatever China is planning to do in East Asia. So we try to underscore that the time to put some of these things in motion is now. Because by the time we start executing our budget, as you know, these things need to be baked in the budget so we can start executing. I think we were fortunate that with the work of AI Commission, a lot of these things were put, the seeds of these work was put in the federal government, in how we understand these technologies, why this is important. If you look at all the actions, whether they started in the Trump administration or continue in the Biden administration, slowing China down just got, like more and more attention, investments through either CHIPS Act, IRA, everything that has been passed was really how do we build domestic capacity in all these technologies, but also how we slow them down. So I think the country is moving. There's a lot of excitement about technologies now. Can we move faster? Absolutely. If you would ask me, I would move faster. But I also understand our government bureaucracy. It doesn't move fast. Our job is really to raise the awareness, raise the urgency, and really keep moving. And I think the time is right. The next 2-3 years are going to be critical in how we position ourselves for the rest of this decade, if not century. We all know that after 2030, and we haven't said this yet, the China world becomes more complicated. Their demographic problem kicks in. And so in turn, I think they know that they have a window of opportunity to make this geopolitical move. But how we position ourselves to mitigate those actions, I think it will depend on the actions we take now through 2025, 26, and 27. So yes, we underscore the urgency every day. We see actions, but we need to move faster, I would argue.
I understand and I underscore your call for urgency, but I want to offer a note of hope. As I said, the Ukraine war was a wake-up call, and recently I was engaged in a conversation with a technology officer in the United States government, and he said, "Steve, I want to talk to people like you and your project." He said, because about a year ago, in February of 2022, I got a frantic call from the White House saying, the Russians are about to move into Ukraine. What do you guys in the technology sphere, what do you got that I can pull out and use to deter the Russians? And he said, I got nothing. He said, I never want to be in that position again. So people are saying, okay, bad things could happen. We need to be ready right soon with what we've got, with adaptations, with better ways of employing things we already have, as well as these midterm efforts to build things that we'll have 5 years from now. So as I said, urgency is of the key. That's what, I could be retired in Florida. I'm out here because it's urgent. But we need to keep the heat on.
It's interesting, the Cold War existed for years before Reagan came about. And he put together a formula that brought it to closure finally. What was it that was that formula that you could speak to that? And do we need that same type of model for this type of warfare?
Well, first of all, we were successful. The United States was successful in the Cold War because it really was bipartisan. Okay? The administrations, the Eisenhower administration, the Kennedy administration, and in particular, when the Cold War got hot again, when the Russians invaded Afghanistan, it was the Carter administration which began some of these endeavors. So what happened is, or the process was, I like to say this to my friends and students, if we're right about the nature of the problem we're facing in the world and what we need to do, reality is our friend. Reality teaches. Look, don't look out the window. Look out at what they're doing here in the United States. And that happened during the Cold War. The invasion of Afghanistan was a wake-up call. The massive deployment of Soviet weapons was a wake-up call. And it created a coalition of people across party lines, Carter and Reagan, to push the ball across the finish line. Reagan was there when it happened. He did some things that nobody else would have done. But it was based on a national consensus. And for years, there was not a national consensus about it. I remember saying what I'm saying now, 10 years ago, and people looked at me like I had a horn growing out of the middle of my head. You're crazy, Steve. We're going to make money with them. They're going to become like us. So I said, reality is your friend. Have they become like us? Have they become better or have they become worse? So the process is, we're a democracy. We're not an elite-run place. Society learns slowly. That's the way we are. We have to help people. We have to get our voices out. We have to teach, which is what we're doing. But the American people, ordinary people, I don't like what Russia's doing. I don't like what China's doing. Can I help? And our job is to say, okay, you want to help? Here's what you can do. The question was, what's the metric of success? The metric of success for me, at least I'm a professor, is young people going to work doing stuff that matters. Why am I here? I'm a Harvard University vet, alumni. The guys, the students there, are given so many opportunities to make fast bucks in banking, in the consulting world, that you can't blame them. They go off and do that. I'm looking for people who want to make a difference, and they don't have the same easy buck opening in some ways. So success for me means people from South Dakota, young people, wind up going to work doing the right stuff. And we can count them up, and we can see where they're doing it. So.
Can I add one more thing, Governor? So with the AI commission work that Dr. Griffiths and I did, we had about 137 young people that we trained and educated in these issues. We only paid for 25. A lot of them came to us because they wanted to serve, they wanted to intern, they wanted to help, whether they were students or post-students. But they are now everywhere in federal government or across the country, really doing what we learned through the process. None of us were AI experts 40 years ago. And none of us could have predicted where are we today because this is moving so fast. So that's one thing. I think public service, I served in the Pentagon for 12 years, is something that I think our government really needs help from anybody. And I think students and Dakota State is really a good model of what you guys do. Second thing is, look at the military recruitment numbers across all services. They're down. And so I think we need to generate that sense of public service among young people that, this is happening. Reality, as Steve, is happening. We face two countries that are allies, and they don't want to see us become or remain number one global power. And so we need young people to understand the threat, that we need the young people to understand that this is not just about geopolitics. Technology is the centerpiece, as PJ said, of this geopolitical competition. And how do we encourage them and how do we motivate them to serve, I think is a critical thing. That's why we're going around the country talking about these issues. But I think this is a no-brainer here for DSU because you guys have been at the front central in helping federal government raising and educating young people to understand what's at stake here.
Yeah, I would just add that in the Soviet Union competition, there was a trigger. And so it was mounting 1950, national security, NSC 68, it was mounting. When Sputnik happened in 57, and the SSP was organized 1 year before that, pre-trigger, there was this sense that reality is our friend and we need to get organized. So SSP started, and then the trigger happened, and then we started competing. We started rolling up our sleeves, and that lasted for 9 US administrations. As reality continued to help, the intrusion of the Soviet Union into everyday American affairs increased. One of them was called the active measures effort for the psychological warfare unit in the Soviet Union to affect the thoughts of Americans. And so then America created what was called the active measures working group to counter it. That was also under Reagan in the 80s. And so when the intensity of the competition, the reality of it intrudes upon the everyday life of our citizens, then we start to unify. We start to collaborate. And it does take time. And this rival is studied of us to act, to know not to trigger us. So if there's anything that Xi Jinping has studied about us, for those who are Chinaologists, it's how we won the Cold War. And so he is as the leader of that economy, completely conscious not to trigger us. But cumulatively, he is. And your awareness and your notification of how intrusive they were in cyber, long ago you noticing that, I mean, those kinds of events are even intrusive in our agriculture world, or taking seed technology, or in our corporations, actual partial or full-time agents of the states transferring knowledge. That's spreading around the country. So cumulatively, they're triggering us. And I think one great sign of that is the China Select Committee. So here you have the representatives of the people, the House, bipartisan. And I don't know if anybody heard that opening session of testimony last month, but to me that was showing me that cumulatively they have triggered us. So I also think that's good news.
Devontae Garcia, Assistant Director of Development here at DSU and the Foundation. Thanks, gentlemen, for coming. The work that you guys do is nothing but short of remarkable. My worry and concern isn't so much about unifying us as a country. I think we're definitely on the right track of getting there. My fear is more so the influence that the Chinese are having globally, as pretty much being a poster child or a beacon of democracy versus autocracy. And with technology right now, just really giving an opportunity for other powers and countries to see that maybe this is a better model. As Governor Ohm talked about, sometimes with democracy and bureaucracy can be kind of slow, but with technology gives countries and leaders who are hungry for power an opportunity to really be able to capture their populace unlike anything else. And so I'm just curious, gentlemen, what your feedback is on how their influence is going across the world and being able to kind of almost essentially kind of have a bifurcation between technology, democracy versus autocracy.
No, what brand do you want to? Great question. We spent a lot of time also talking to our allies and partners, because one thing that China doesn't have is they don't have the network of allies and partners we have around the world. And I think what they have done with our allies and partners is what they've done here. They've spread their technology. They subsidize heavily their companies. So when the choice was between, let's say, a Western 5G company and a Huawei that is heavily subsidized, of course these countries have gone with the cheaper versions. I think there's generally a sense of wake up of where this is going. We spent a lot of time with Europeans and Asian partners. In Europe, the war in Ukraine really is, you can feel it. When I go there, there's a sense in Europe that they haven't been in war since World War II. And this is happening. And for them, Ukraine war is their closest crocodile to the shore. They are starting to understand the China threat. Do I say they're there? They are still not there. But for the last 4 years, in any engagements we have had with Europeans, where China was not existing in our conversation, to now we completely understand what you guys have been telling us for years, that has shifted. What we need to do, I would argue, is as democracies get together and provide options to the rest of the world on these technologies. Because until they have an alternative what China is providing, of course they're going to go with Chinese technologies. As PJ mentioned, even in our hemisphere, there are countries that are using Chinese technologies because we did not have an alternative to provide to these countries. We don't subsidize our companies. This is our organizing model. They do. But I think because of this wake-up call, there's a broad sense of, why we need to get ourselves organized. I usually talk about Xi Jinping. 4 years ago, Xi Jinping, I think, gave this big speech, and he identified 9 technologies they need to stay ahead. I got an email from Eric right away saying, Illy, what is the United States list? And then we sat down with PJ and we went through this of, what is the list? Because the list, our federal government and probably at the state level, you guys have all sorts of lists. White House has a list of 23 technologies. DoD has a list of 13 technologies. But really, what are the list of technologies you can count in 10 fingers of your hand that we need to double down? And so PJ's team sat down, they looked at what are the technologies that China aims to dominate and where are they right now, and what are the technologies that we have to double down. I would argue that with allies and partners, we will double down then on this technology lists. I call it the democracy list of technologies, that we really bring down our resources, we bring our people together, and we bring our joint research and development capabilities together so we stay ahead, and then ultimately offer it to the rest of the world. So, PJ, do you want to talk a little bit about the net assessment?
Yeah, absolutely. So, Devante, it's such an important question because, like the governor's question, their influence in technology has been cumulative. There's no one thing they're doing that's going to affect the destiny of nations, but cumulatively, this picture you see above, which we published, is called their technology sphere of influence. And it goes from 0 to 7 to show how they shape fundamental things like critical supply chains and minerals, 0-1. And then it goes around the clock of how they've created global communication systems. They actually have mega projects, number 3, for whole sectors. They're moving on to biotech. In fact, one of our commissioners, are we on the record or off the record? We're on the record? Okay. I'm trying to think. It was a private conversation, so I say, but basically, they're already moving on to biotech. When we did the AI Commission, we were 5 years behind them, and they're already on to biotech because they need food security, and they have a demographic challenge. They know that, so they have to dominate biotech for endogenous purposes. So they have plans for sectors. They're shaping international standards. And if you keep going around the clock, they are now players in foreign military sales. In fact, there's an incredible confidential story that's playing out in the Middle East where the U.S. wouldn't sell equipment to a certain nation on principle of how that nation was using the equipment we gave them. We cut them off completely, which was just. And they immediately turned and started buying high-end equipment from China. So that is your question. That is power, right? Technology accords power. So the traditional power model of DIME, diplomacy, intelligence, information, military, economy, a DIME power model, technology, translates into power and spheres of influence in a way that we really have never been so challenged because the Soviet Union competition was really military, nuclear, space. So this one's really different. It's whole society. It's totally economic. Its technology subtends the instruments of power, and we had to tell that story. This is how we've tried to tell it, to answer your question. Cumulatively, their sphere of influence is changing so much that even in Israel, where Belt and Road terminates in the port of Haifa today, and I have been in Haifa for business, for ops, and get on a plane, and it is not just like PRC nationals, but CCP nationals on the plane doing business to conduct in Haifa. Now Israel has to make decisions between the United States and China on things upon which decisions could turn between nations, right? Because now they have a relationship with both. And that's happening all across the world in ways that we had to show the cumulative effects of. This is a really important question. Yeah, thank you, Devontae.
Just a quick comment on the intersection between the technology competition and the competition for hearts and minds in the global south. The CCP has consciously made an effort. We're going to encircle the United States and the West European industrial world by building influence in sub-Saharan Africa, the less developed areas of the world, which have been historically exploited by Western imperialism, which see themselves as being unnecessarily or unjustly pushed around on human rights and other kinds of things by Americans. Okay. Again, reality is our friend. China is supporting regimes which are doing horrible things to their people. China is linking up now in Russia with Iran. My wife is Iranian. She is beside herself because she sees what's happening to the young women who are the daughters of her friends. The battle for hearts and minds will be lost by the Chinese if the truth gets out. But the technological infrastructure may give the Chinese the ability to control the narrative. So that's the intersection. If they own the information highway, the story that people will see will be the story that the Chinese government wants them to see. And we can't let that happen.
Can I just add one more thing, because Steve triggered one more. The one talking point we usually use with Europeans is Chinese are building global digital infrastructure with routers, antennas, everything. And on top of that, laying software capabilities. I think TikTok is the first one, but there are other software companies that are making inroads into our life. And so I usually tell them, in 2025, you can wake up and everything in your digital life will go through servers, data, or software run by Beijing. And so do you want to live in that future? To the Steve's point about the global south, which I don't want to call it global south, but the rest of the world. I think what Xi Jinping was doing for the last 3 weeks, both with trying to broker a peace in the Middle East between Iranians and Saudis, and now with Putin and Ukrainians, showcasing China as the peacemaker and us as the trouble going around the world, making all these messes. And so, not that he cared about, this is my personal read of Iran and Saudi Arabia peace, as much as he wanted to show to the rest of the world, because of the purposes that Steve was talking about, markets, inroads, digital dominance, and all the things that have built for years. And so this is where I talk that we got to get together as democracies and go to the rest of the world, provide alternatives to what China has been doing for many, many years.
Okay, thank you. Well, I'd like to thank our speakers for being here and giving us a lot of food for thought. This is not the only time we'll be talking about this. We've actually recorded this session, so we'll be able to play it for others across the university and across the region. I think it's very important. But I do have to say one thing. You asked us if you could come here and do your workshop for our undergraduates, and we said, yes, please, we'd love to have you here. But then I asked you, would you be willing to do a session with our 70 doctoral students who were in session this week, and you agreed to do that. And then I said, would you mind if we have a session with people from around South Dakota, leadership in political leadership and business leadership and academic leadership, and you said yes. So I really want to thank you for being flexible, being willing to bring your expertise to even more groups that we have here, and we hope that this is not the one and only time you come. And I also thank the governor for being here today. So if we can have a good round of applause for everyone. Thank you all.